Thomas Miller watched raindrops on his office window. His phone buzzed. Catherine again. He ignored it. Their last argument had been brutal. 7 years of marriage had deteriorated from love to tolerance to hostility. His only joy was Jacob, their 5-year-old son, with his curiosity about dinosaurs and space. "Mr. Miller, your 3 o'clock is here." After a lengthy meeting, Thomas checked his phone. 3 missed calls and a text from Catherine. "We need to talk." Not optional. When he arrived home, Catherine sat rigidly on the sofa with wine. "You're late," she said. "I had a meeting." "Where's Jacob?" "At my sister's. I thought we needed space for this conversation." "What conversation?" "I've filed for divorce. My lawyer submitted the papers this morning." Though expected, it hit Thomas hard. "You couldn't have discussed this with me first?" "We've been discussing our problems for 2 years. Nothing changes. I suggested counseling." "After those text messages with your colleague?" "A bit late. Those messages were taken completely out of context. Jennifer and I were working on the Phoenix project. I want sole custody of Jacob. He's my son." "Catherine." "Is he?" The words hung poisonously between them. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. I want sole custody with supervised visitation. Given your work schedule, it's best for Jacob." "That's ridiculous. I'm an excellent father. When was the last time you picked him up from school? Do you even know his teacher's name?" Their argument escalated until Catherine left to retrieve Jacob. Thomas poured himself a scotch and silently promised to fight for his son. Jacob was all that mattered now. In the law firm conference room, Thomas sat with his attorney Marcus Levitt. Across the table, Catherine was accompanied by Eleanor Winters, a formidable divorce attorney. "Let's start with assets," Marcus began. "Actually," Eleanor interrupted, "my client prefers to address custody first." "Mr. Miller seeks joint physical and legal custody," Marcus stated. "Ms. Miller requests sole legal and physical custody with supervised visitation twice monthly for Mr. Miller." "That's absurd," Thomas interjected. "On what grounds?" "Your documented absence in the child's life. Ms. Miller has been Jacob's primary caregiver while you've averaged 60-plus work hours weekly." After 3 hours, no resolution was reached. As they prepared to adjourn, Eleanor dropped a bombshell. "My client will be requesting DNA testing as part of these proceedings." Thomas stared at Catherine, who finally met his gaze. "What are you talking about?" he asked quietly. "It's standard procedure," Eleanor responded. Outside, Thomas struggled to maintain composure. "She's implying Jacob isn't my son." "That's insane." Marcus's expression was grim. "It's a tactic to throw you off balance. Jacob looks like me. Everyone says so. Then the test will prove it, and her strategy will backfire." That night, Thomas watched Jacob sleep, studying his features, his nose, his brow, the tiny mole near his right ear that matched Thomas's own. "You're my son," he whispered, "no matter what she says." But a memory surfaced. Catherine's unexplained 2-week trip to visit her college roommate, 6 years ago, just before announcing her pregnancy. Thomas had been in Hong Kong on business. Now, doubt crept in. At the Cook County Family Court, Thomas and Marcus arrived for the preliminary custody hearing. The DNA test results had arrived yesterday in a sealed envelope. Thomas had refused to look at them. Judge Maria Hernandez presided. After opening statements, she addressed the paternity test. "I understand there is the matter of a DNA test to address." Marcus stood. "Yes, Your Honor, we have the results here. My client has not yet been made aware of them." The judge read the contents silently. "In light of these results," she finally said, "I'm granting temporary sole custody to Ms. Miller, with Mr. Miller to have supervised visitation twice weekly pending further hearings." "Your Honor," Thomas said, rising unsteadily, "may I know the results?" "The test indicates with 99.97% certainty that you are not the biological father of Jacob Miller." The courtroom receded around Thomas. One thought consumed him. Jacob wasn't his son. The child he had read bedtime stories to, taught to ride a bike, comforted after nightmares, was not his flesh and blood. "However," Judge Hernandez continued, "you have acted as Jacob's father for 5 years. Under Illinois law, you may have established yourself as the psychological parent, regardless of biological connection. This gives you certain rights we will explore in subsequent hearings." Outside the courtroom, Catherine approached Thomas. "We need to talk," she said quietly. 5 years, Catherine. 5 years I've loved him as my own. Were you ever going to tell me?" "Not here. Please, tell me who," Thomas demanded. "Who is Jacob's father?" "Michael Reese," she whispered. "From my office." The name hit Thomas hard. Michael Reese, Catherine's colleague who had attended their dinner parties, who had once helped assemble Jacob's bicycle. He doesn't know, Catherine added. It was a mistake. One time, when you were in Hong Kong. One time was enough to destroy our family. Our marriage was already broken, Catherine countered. But you love Jacob. He loves you. That's real, is it? Or is that just another lie? Outside, Thomas stood in the rain. What happens now? He asked Marcus. We fight. Biology isn't everything in family court. Thomas nodded. I want to see my son. Thomas waited in the Family Services Center's play area. 2 weeks had passed since the hearing. 2 weeks of sleepless nights and numbing disbelief. Jacob burst in, his face lighting up. Daddy! Thomas held him tight. Hey, buddy, I've missed you so much. I got a new dinosaur book. Mom says you're staying somewhere else for a while. That's right, but I wanted to see you today. Are you and Mom fighting? Jacob asked directly. We've been having some grown-up problems. But none of those problems have anything to do with how much we both love you. Tommy at school says his dad moved to Phoenix after the divorce. Are you moving to Phoenix? No, buddy. I'm staying right here in Chicago. I'd never move far away from you. They played for 2 hours. Throughout, Thomas found himself searching Jacob's features for signs of Michael Reese. Yet every laugh, every mannerism felt intimately familiar. DNA test or not, this was his son in all ways that mattered. When their time ended, Jacob clung to Thomas. Can't you come home with me? Not today, buddy, but I'll see you again very soon. After Jacob left, Thomas received a text from Marcus. Good news. Judge granted our motion for psychological parentage evaluation. Call me. The judge recognized your case for psychological parentage, Marcus explained. Your established relationship with Jacob gives you standing as his de facto parent. What about Catherine? Her attorney filed a motion arguing that Jacob's biological father should be notified. Michael Reese. Thomas's voice was flat. The judge hasn't ruled on that yet. Catherine's position is complicated. If she brings Reese in, she admits deceiving both of you for years. That night, Thomas scrolled through photos. Jacob's birth with Thomas cutting the umbilical cord, first birthday, beach trips. He searched online for Michael Reese and found his professional profile. There was something in his eyes that Thomas now recognized in Jacob. Thomas considered contacting him but closed his laptop. Some decisions required more than impulse. 3 months later, court reconvened. The psychological evaluation had been completed. Before we begin, Judge Hernandez said, I'll address the motion regarding notification of the biological father. Ms. Miller, you've withdrawn your motion? Yes, Your Honor, Eleanor responded. My client believes involving a third party would cause unnecessary confusion for the child. Very well. I've reviewed Dr. Levine's evaluation thoroughly. His findings indicate a strong, healthy bond between the minor child and Mr. Miller, despite the lack of biological relationship. The judge continued. Ms. Miller has been the primary caregiver throughout the child's life. However, Dr. Levine also emphasizes the critical importance of maintaining the father-child relationship developed over these 5 years. My ruling is as follows. Ms. Miller will retain primary physical custody. However, Mr. Miller is granted joint legal custody and expanded visitation rights, including alternate weekends, Wednesday overnights, and equal division of holidays and school breaks. Additionally, no supervisor will be required for these visits, effective immediately. Both parents are ordered to attend co-parenting counseling for a minimum of 6 sessions. Outside the courtroom, Catherine approached Thomas. Can we talk? Alone. Thank you for not telling the court about Michael, for not bringing him into this. I didn't do it for you. I know. She looked down. I did love you, Thomas. I never planned for this to happen. But it did happen. You lied to me for 5 years about something fundamental. And would you have preferred never to have been Jacob's father? Because that's the alternative. The question hit Thomas with unexpected force. Would he trade away the past 5 years? The sleepless nights with a colicky infant, the first steps, the bedtime stories. No, he admitted. I wouldn't. Then maybe some lies have their purpose. That doesn't make them right. I've accepted the joint legal custody, Catherine said. I won't fight you on decisions about his schooling or medical care. And Michael Reese? He doesn't know. I'd like to keep it that way, at least until Jacob is older. That should be Jacob's decision, eventually. When he's old enough to understand. I'll drop Jacob off Friday at 6, Catherine said. Thomas nodded. I'll have him ready by noon on Sunday. 15 months later, Thomas and Jacob spent the weekend at Thomas's new lake house in Wisconsin. They swam, prepared lunch, and planned a fishing expedition. Thomas's relationship with Catherine had evolved from tense formality to collaborative respect. Their court-mandated counseling had helped establish boundaries. Catherine had even supported Thomas when he began dating Rebecca, a pediatric surgeon. "Dad?" Jacob asked as they fished off the dock. "Are you and Mom ever getting back together?" "No, buddy. That's not going to happen. But we both love you very much." "Is that why you go on dates with Rebecca?" "Partly. Rebecca makes me happy. But she knows you're the most important person in my life." "I like Rebecca. She knows all the dinosaur names." Jacob caught a fish, and they celebrated his success. As evening approached, he grew contemplative again. "Dad? Are you my real dad?" Thomas froze. "What makes you ask that?" "I heard Mom talking on the phone to Aunt Lisa. She said something about biological father, and then she saw me and stopped talking." Thomas sat down with Jacob. "There are different kinds of fathers. Some fathers are called biological fathers. They're the ones whose bodies help create the baby. Like how plants make seeds. Something like that. Then there are fathers who raise children, who love them and teach them. Sometimes these are the same person. Sometimes they're different people." "So, you didn't make the seed?" "No, I didn't. But I've been your dad in every other way since the day you were born. I was there when you came into this world. I've loved you every single day of your life." "So who made the seed?" "That's a complicated story for when you're a bit older. The important thing is that I'm your dad. I will always be your dad." Jacob was quiet, then said simply, "Okay, you're my dad. Can we have hot dogs for dinner?" That night, Thomas texted Catherine about Jacob's question. She responded, "I'm sorry. I should have been more careful. How are you doing?" "I'm good," he texted back, realizing it was true. "We're good." Thomas checked on Jacob, peacefully asleep, biological or not. This was his son. Some truths were painful, some lies devastating. But their bond, father and son, beyond blood but bound by love, that was the truth that mattered most. 3 years later at Jacob's elementary school graduation, Thomas sat between Rebecca, now his wife, and Catherine with her fiancé David. Jacob, now 9, had grown tall, his interests shifting from dinosaurs to astronomy and soccer. 2 years earlier, they had told Jacob the full truth with a therapist's help. Jacob had processed the information gradually and eventually expressed curiosity about meeting Michael Reese. The meeting had been arranged carefully, with clear boundaries. Michael had been shocked but handled the situation gracefully, respecting Thomas's role while establishing his own relationship with Jacob, more like an uncle than a competing father. After the ceremony, their unusual family gathered as Jacob proudly displayed his certificate and science award. Michael arrived discreetly at the edge of the schoolyard. "Can Michael come say hi?" Jacob asked. Thomas and Catherine exchanged glances and nodded. As they all headed to lunch together, Thomas, Rebecca, Catherine, David, Jacob, and Michael, Thomas felt an unexpected peace. The truth had nearly destroyed them. But from those broken pieces, they had built something new. Not a perfect family, not even a conventional one, but one held together by something stronger than biology. Choice. Every day, they chose to be family to one another. Every day, they chose to put Jacob's well-being first. In the end, perhaps that was the most important truth of all.